Welcome back, everyone, to the Ever Living podcast. We're glad to have you here today. We have the esteemed Dr. James-Sherley here with us. He's here with SALT, which is the newly formed Science Alliance for Life and Technology, and they are a group of scientists and researchers that are working to publish life-affirming research and research that values human dignity. So thank you so much for being here, Dr. Sherley.
Thank you for having me on, Jessica.
Absolutely. Yeah. How are you doing today?
You know what? I just wanted to tell you, I really like your intro to this podcast, the
Yeah.
babies, because that's what SALT is sort of about. Young human beings, some even younger than babies, that we want to find a way to help protect them better.
Absolutely. No, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe you can tell us more what SALT does, what the why it was founded, and yeah, the great work that you guys do.
Could you actually start with just telling us a
Yeah,
little bit,
so
sorry,
we,
not to interrupt, but could you tell us a little bit about your background, about yourself before we jump into
oh,
SALT so
sure.
people know who you are?
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I like to tell people I'm a scientist because I am, and I always wanted to be a scientist. Uh, I'm a special kind of scientist called a physician scientist. So I have medical training as well as research training. I went to medical school, and I spent most of my career doing what I wanted to grow up to do, which was to do scientific research. In the beginning, my research was in cancer cell molecular biology. So, how do cancers come into being? What are the properties of cancers? How do we treat them? And then in the latter half of my academic career, I started studying stem cells, and specifically what are called adult tissue stem cells. And I spent about 25 years doing that. I really enjoyed teaching graduate students, training other scientists, postdocs, that type of thing. And then about 13 years ago, I left academia and started a startup company. And that company I now lead as the president and CEO. The company is called Asymmetrex, and we are developing technologies for being able to count accurately therapeutic tissue stem cells. So when people get cancer treatments where they get a stem cell transplant, currently that's done without knowing the dose of stem cells. So we're developing technologies that will help physicians know how many stem cells they're transplanting, which means that those therapies can be more effective.
Oh, okay.
I got him. Yeah, so that's pretty much my career trajectory, and what I spend my time doing now is again working in asymmetrics to develop better ways of quantifying tissue stem cells.
Okay. So you count the number of stem cells. Is that right? Or wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Is that a secret sauce, or can you give us more detail on how that works?
Oh yeah, I can tell you how we do it. So the first thing is to understand, why do you need to count stem cells in the first
Yeah.
place? So all stem cells for stem cell treatments come from donors. Some person consented to have the cells removed from their body to be given to someone else. And stem cells are a very small fraction of the cells in our tissues. So when you get a stem cell sample, for instance, from your bloodstream or from bone marrow, there are other cells present in addition to the stem cells.
Mm-hmm.
The stem cells are what's responsible for the effective treatment. So you sort of need to know, A, that you have stem cells in the sample, and B, how many stem cells are in the sample, because that determines how much you give to the patient. And to give you an example of how important this is, one of the main types of stem cell transplants now for children are called cord blood stem cell transplants. So when a child has cancer, they get treated for the cancer. The treatments destroy their bone marrow stem cells, so they need another source.
Mm-hmm.
So they can get those cells from blood. Now the problem is that about 20% of those cord blood transplants to kids fail.
Mm-hmm.
That means that the child now has to have another source, or that child isn't going to survive. The reason those transplants fail, they didn't have enough
Huh.
stem cells. The problem we have by not being able to count stem cells, we don't know when a cord blood transplant has sufficient stem cells versus when it doesn't.
Mm.
So one of the things that we hope we're going to be able to do with our counting technology is to be able to let physicians know this sample needs more stem cells. And the way we do this, we do it by mathematics. We do it by computational methods. So we could take a sample, we can analyze how the cells in that sample grow, and we can tell how many stem cells are responsible for that growth.
Wow.
That's our technology.
Very cool. That's really interesting.
Are you guys really good at guessing like the number of candies in a jar? Like
That's a great way to describe the stem cell counting problem.
Okay.
Right? There's just a few important candies in the jar. How do you know how many are in there?
Yeah.
And so that's what we do. We take a sample out of the jar and we figure out from that sample how many stem cells are in the jar.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Do you?
So I'm curious.
Can you say? Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I'm curious. Where are you guys at in developing that technology? Like, is this a technology that's currently being tested, and like, where are you in that development process for actually being able to count the stem cells?
So our company right now is in the process of developing the first stem cell counting instrument. It's a laboratory instrument that you can take a sample, put it into this instrument, and it will tell you how many stem cells are in the sample. So we are at the point right now of building what's called an alpha instrument, the very first form of it, the prototype. And we hope that we'll be able to reach full development and testing of that instrument and be able to start selling it this time next year.
Very cool.
Wow.
We're in the process. Yeah.
That's awesome.
So, Dr. Sherley, I think sometimes when the general public hears stem cells, they get a little nervous, like about, I think, cells coming from like babies in the womb. I think that is what makes people nervous about talking about stem cells. Can you explain, like, reassure our listeners, like these are not unethical, right? Stem cells.
Yeah. So Cindy, that's exactly what we want to do at SALT.
Okay.
Awesome.
So our goal at SALT is to be a group of scientists. There are 5 of us right now who are founding members. We also have 2 members who are experts in public policy development. And our goal is to have a website where someone with that concern can come to the site and get that concern addressed. And the way we address those kinds of concerns is with education. So the education needed to address that concern is to know what is an ethically sourced stem cell preparation and what is an unethically sourced one. And it's, when you think about it, it's actually pretty easy to figure this out conceptually. An ethically sourced stem cell sample is one where no one was injured in the sourcing of the sample. Not another person, not an embryo. And an unethical source of stem cells would be stem cells that are produced, that are collected, and someone was injured in the process. So with that basis there, then we can talk about, well, what other kinds of stem cells are there? So our instrument counts adult tissue stem cells. More specifically, scientifically, they're called postnatal stem cells. They're stem cells that are in people after they've been born.
Okay.
They're after birth.
Yeah.
Right? So that includes what are called perinatal stem cells that are in tissues that are associated with birth. Cord blood. Umbilical cords can be collected with consent from patients. The baby's not injured. The parent's not injured. And those cells can be used to benefit other patients. Those are adult stem cells. Those are adult tissue stem cells. And the same thing's true for stem cells that are collected from adults, or where you go and you give your consent, you receive a treatment to help stem cells move into your bloodstream, and then those the blood is collected and the stem cells are removed to help another person. So in all those cases, no one's being injured in the process.
Right.
Now, there's another type of stem cell that is actually responsible for me moving into the pro-life movement in 2001. Those are called embryonic stem cells.
Yeah.
And embryonic stem cells come from embryos. And in order to make those stem cells, the embryo has to be destroyed. And since that embryo is a nascent living human being, that is an unethical source of stem cells. So that's the kind of information that's available at our site. You can come to our site, pose a question like that, and get information to help with understanding the issues that are at play.
Dr. Sherley, would you say that embryonic stem cells are still being used, experimented, like extracted? What is that still in use and at the cost of someone's life? Yeah.
Yeah. Not nearly as much as it was in 2000, in the early 2000s. So there is still some research going on, both that is not publicly funded, using embryos though. So one of the reasons why embryonic stem cells have not been used nearly as much as in the past is because of the development of another type of stem cells that are artificial. They're called induced pluripotent stem cells. And Shinji Yamanaka got the Nobel Prize for discovering how to take mature cells, which are not derived from embryos, and turn them into cells that have properties of embryonic stem cells. Those are the induced pluripotent stem cells. So once those cells became available, lots of research has been done with them that is not unethical in its origins. But now there is research happening that SALT is, again, making sure the public is aware of. That is human embryo research, right? So this is research where scientists now can use the pluripotent stem cells to make eggs and to make sperm to create new embryos from fusing them.
Wow.
Scientists have also learned how to take embryonic stem cells or these induced pluripotent stem cells and biomanufacture embryos. That is all happening in the area of research, not treatment. So one of the things that SALT is here to do is to let the public know about research, which they may be paying for with their taxpayer dollars in some cases, that involves conceiving human beings for the purpose of doing experimental research with them.
That's horrifying.
So this is a relatively new area. It really is. It is. That is the right word to describe it. But scientists have learned how. Again, this is the people talk about the fruits of embryonic stem cell research. This is the tragedy of it. So because of embryonic stem cell research, we've learned how to do these bioengineered embryos. And even the ethical idea of induced pluripotent stem cells, because they have the same, what we call pluripotent properties, those cells are now being used unethically to create basically parentless children. Right? These are embryos that are manufactured in the laboratory for the purpose of watching them develop to do research. And what happens at the end of those studies? Those embryos are destroyed. And there's just thousands of embryos dying this way now. So SALT, number one, we want the public to be aware of it. We want to provide the public with the education to understand what's unethical about it. And the unethical thing there is human beings are being conceived for the purposes of experimenting on them and then letting them die.
Absolutely. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, thank you for sharing all that. And I'm glad that our listeners will learn about the fact that this is going on. I mean, I certainly haven't thought that deeply into the fact that this is happening. So you're saying, so Salt's goal is to educate people on this. So is it mainly going to be through a website where you're going to be posting? Because Salt is fairly new, right? When was it founded?
Yeah. It was officially founded in August of
Okay.
last year. We were incorporated in October as a not-for-profit.
Okay. Very cool. So is yeah.
And the
Go
answer,
ahead.
Mm-hmm.
in addition to our website, one of the things that we're doing is presentations like this one. We're talking with people who are in the pro-life area, actually in any area, that want to share with the public these new developments and provide the tools for thinking about these things in terms of the ethics or the lack of ethics involved in them. We'll
Yeah.
be doing things like also developing, research reports talking about these types of ethical issues. Um,
Very interesting.
Yeah.
No,
Uh,
thank you.
Dr.
Absolutely. We're so glad to
Dr.
have you
Shirley,
on here sharing about all this. So some of the other, so basically you're a coalition of a bunch of different researchers. So obviously you're doing, research on stem cells. What is some of the other research that some of the other founders take part in?
so right now, pretty much our entire group, because of how we sort of found each other, we're in the reproductive biology, the embryology area of study. So we're all biologists. And one of the
Okay.
things that we want to do is we want to bring other types of scientists from other disciplines to come together to work with us. And one of our
Very
focuses
cool.
right now is the ways in which AI is being misused in the area of reproductive medicine.
Mm. I was curious about the AI component of it, that when I was reading a little bit about Salt. Could you elaborate a little bit more on how AI is being used unethically?
Yeah, so it's very recent, but there are now about four companies. There's a report in the MIT Technology Review magazine that talks about this new development with AI and human reproduction, reproductive medicine. So there are four companies now that offer what is called designer babies.
Mm,
And the idea behind it is that there are people who come because of infertility problems to get in vitro fertilization. And often when in vitro fertilization happens, you get multiple embryos. You have multiple children that are available for implantation. These companies are selling to parents the idea that they can take a cell sample from one of those embryos and make predictions about the child's characteristics that will be born. Characteristics such as athleticism, intelligence, disease freedom from, increased health, even things like how long they will live. So they are telling the parents that they can actually make those kinds of selections, right?
huh.
So the first big problem is they can't, right? So they're collecting money to have people do this selection, telling them that they can make predictions about what those, and they patently cannot do that. The where AI is they're telling patients or parents that they can do this by using AI, that they can take a sample from a cell from a young child embryo, determine its DNA sequence, determine its gene expression patterns, and use AI to be able to predict what that individual that the cell came from is going to be. And it's not possible to do that. AI, in order for the way to think about AI in these processes is this: if we have, let's just say, without using AI, we have science and technology that we understand, AI can help us do it faster, do it more efficiently. But we actually don't know how to do this even without AI. The problem is you have to be able to look at all of these genes and how they're expressed and try to make sense of what the prediction is going to be. And we don't have any knowledge in that way. So what they're promising AI is not going to make that happen either. So
So they're essentially lying to people
it
just
is,
so
yeah, they are
in the
lying.
interest of making money. They're basically saying, we can predict who your child's going to be, and they have no idea how to do it. And then I would assume you're going to get into this, but I would assume they're destroying the embryos that don't have those
That
characteristics, or that
is
they're saying,
exactly the case. So
okay,
the embryos that don't get selected, they stay in the freezer, they get discarded, they get abandoned. Um, it's a horrible thing to be doing. Um, and also, here's the other thing: when, in IVF right now, one of the big problems is that more embryos are made than are needed. What we should be trying to do is to make IVF more efficient, so we only make the embryos that are going to be implanted and have a chance for life. This new activity encourages families to do what? Make more embryos. It's aggravating an unethical problem that we already have. It's making it worse. So again, the public needs to hear the truth about what's being offered and promised. So if you are out there someplace and you're thinking somebody's said, "Hey, go to this company and get a designer baby made," you can come to our site and learn what does that really mean, and what's the right way to think about it, and how do you make it? Yeah.
and I think the other thing with IVF, like personally speaking, I don't support IVF in general. But the other thing I think people don't know a lot of the time, they think that IVF is the only solution to infertility. And whereas there's also like natural reproductive, people can meet with a natural, like a doctor who can help fix those underlying issues that a woman or a man might be having, that's preventing them from being able to get pregnant. So I really think that you know IVF has kind of been sold as this one solution to infertility, and then that's also obviously causing there to be so many more ethical problems with it.
So that is
So
a very good point. And one of our principles is talking about alternatives, right? Either
yeah,
whatever what the goal may be, whether the goal be a research goal or a health goal, looking for alternatives, identifying alternatives that allows you to achieve that goal ethically, morally.
yeah,
And so that's exactly the case where this industry, IVF, has been driven by the paying for cycles of treatment. And if you talk to people who have had IVF, there are some who have they've ended up conceiving naturally, despite the fact that the IVF doctors told them they had a very, very minuscule chance of conceiving. So I think that, again, people need to know exactly what's going on, what the truth of the matter is, and to be informed about other choices they have besides the one that they're being presented with. That's how we get
yeah.
to a
No,
more ethical society, by helping people to get to better ethical solutions.
so that's like one of the goals, is like educating through SALT, educating people on what's going on, and then also providing information about those alternative ethical solutions on the website. And yeah, among the different researchers, that's really interesting. This is very, very important work that you all are doing. And really just being able to educate the public who might not know about all these specific things that are going on about it. So absolutely. um, yeah, so how can people support SALT? What's the best way to learn about your work? I know you mentioned the website. I don't know, Ben, if you could share the website. Um, yeah, if you could just walk us through kind of what the website entails.
So it highlights what our mission is. And I think the way that people can help us in this mission is by talking about it, letting people
Okay.
know about the SALT site, the SALT goals, talking to each other about what they're learning from the information that's there. The site's only been up since January 22nd, I think, right now.
Okay.
But one of
Brand
the
new.
yeah,
Okay.
so one of the things we want to do though is to hear from people about what their needs are for information. I do believe that the way we get to being a more moral nation, a more ethical nation, is by having better education around these issues. Um,
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. No, I definitely agree with you. I think that's something I've at least noticed even in my job as well, is like just the lack of knowledge that people have on these issues. Even on the abortion issue, like a lot of people just don't really know about fetal development. They weren't taught in school. Like,
yeah,
part of it's like changing our curriculum so that we're actually telling people about, you know, stuff like that, like fetal development, and also, or like what an abortion actually is, what actually happens during the abortion, or how dangerous it can be. I mean, there was that study that recently came out by the Ethics and Public Policy Center about the fact that almost 11% of all women who take chemical abortion pills are having a serious adverse reaction to it.
yes.
Like, just being knowledge, like telling people about this information. And what I've noticed in my job is when I like share this information with students, they're like appalled. They're like, "Oh my gosh, I've never heard that before," and it really does make them think twice about it. So,
Sometimes, even those of us who spend a lot of our waking hours thinking about these problems and what we can do to reduce them or end them, we can be shocked by things. One of the things that shocks me now, I was actually sitting at a scientific conference today, and somebody was saying that the leading cause of death in America is coronary artery disease. Right? It isn't. The
mm-hmm.
leading cause of death in America is abortion.
Yep.
It exceeds the rate at which people die from cardiovascular disease by 50%. It's 0.3% compared to 0.2% for cardiac disease, right? So I think people have to think about what does that mean in our nation to have that be the truth, right? And so,
Yeah.
so in addition to the science, SALT will also be talking about these kinds of issues too, providing this type of information and getting people to understand that they're all interrelated. Um, one of the other thing I wanted to just mention too, Jessica, you talked about where people get information. I think we have to stop letting it be that if you go through our from first grade to high school, unless you take a biology class, you don't learn about human reproduction. Right? We've got to we got to take some things got to
Exactly.
come out of the biology and science and just be a part of our how we help people become the most fulfilled and able human beings in our country. How people grow up. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, that was actually something that New Hampshire tried to do. They tried to pass legislation. New Hampshire Right to Life helped with it last year, to show a fetal development video in like the public school curriculum. And it actually, so the bill had passed basically the state house and the state senate, and then the governor vetoed this legislation. So that's one thing we've been really kind of upset about, and kind of
Yeah.
trying to grasp that, because we're like, that's just knowledge, right? That's just learning about fetal development. It should be basic, and that bill has been introduced again this session. So hopefully, maybe there'll be a change of mind with that.
Yeah.
But
We've got to keep working at that because our lives go from they begin in a very state that's very abstract to the average person, right?
yeah.
I'm concerned about thousands and thousands of human beings being destroyed in research that are embryos that the average person doesn't understand. Why is that a human being?
Hmm.
Right? So we have to make this normal because it is normal. And that means that we have to have forums where people can learn and talk about it. Right? Because if
Absolutely.
all of a sudden you realize the number of I talked about that number for for um, for babies, for fetuses being aborted. But if you look at what's happening in research laboratories, it probably dwarfs that number,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And the problem, I think, we talk about where is the injury happening. if we live in a society where we know these things are happening and we accept it, it impacts the quality of all our lives because it impacts the way we think about each other's and our value. So
Mm.
salt definitely a big part of what underlies our motivation is trying to get to a better society where we're better to each other because the smallest and youngest of us we protect and we care about.
Absolutely. So, Dr. Shirley, I had thank you so much for coming on the podcast. And, we had to probably wrap up in a second, but I did have one last question just because I feel like just being in the pro life movement, I've seen this a lot with just certain organizations and research that comes out. Is sometimes when I'm citing research, whether it be from maybe like the Charlotte Lozier Institute or kind of like a more pro life source, people don't believe it. Like they don't believe the research that I'm stating. They don't think that research is reliable because it's a pro life organization and they think that it's biased. So, do you have any thoughts on how SALT plans to kind of, you know, break down that bias, like kind of get past that point where people aren't, don't believe you just because it's a pro-life organization? Or do you have any thoughts on that?
I do, and these thoughts come from my days when I first got involved in the human embryonic stem cell debate and talking about how making embryonic stem cells was an unethical, immoral thing to do. And the best way to deal with those folks is what we're going to do. We're going to invite them to debate us. Right. So we're
Mm,
going to send out invitations to these places to say, come and let's have a forum and talk about it. Let's talk about what the facts are that we all understand. And we can disagree on what we want to do with those facts, but let's just get the facts right. Um, and that's what we want the public to be informed so that they can make decisions that are based on truth.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. No, I like that. I think, yeah, having people exactly having a space to actually talk and hopefully be willing to have these conversations and move towards a more ethical future.
Yeah.
So, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Shirley, for coming on the podcast. We really loved learning about the work that you're doing. And yeah, this is really an awesome development in the pro life movement. And I think a really needed thing. I really think that this coalition is alliance is really important. So yeah, everyone, I encourage you to check out Salt's work. The website is salt, the number 4life.org altogether. And yeah, so thank you so
I
much. Thank you for coming on the
Well,
pod.
I have
thank
one
you,
more
Philip, too. Yeah.
I have one more follow-up.
Okay.
Um, so for the, let's say, just person who's maybe not a scientist, what how would you encourage them to think about all these things, to, you know, to be informed or share this with others, or what can someone who's not, you know, an intense scientist, how can they also be part of what you're doing?
We're going to have associates, and they're going to be different forms of people who aren't scientists who can still be a part of our community. And it's something we want to grow because we want everyone to be talking about this the way you talk about air. We breathe it in, we breathe it out. Important stuff happens inside our lungs. We don't need to know everything that happens inside of our lungs to know that the air is important. So it's the
Right.
same idea. We want people to have the fundamentals of what these processes are, and so it just becomes a part of just making it a part of the education. We want to be that place where you can come and get a neutral, independent source of information about these very, very important issues. So one of the things I will just say, one of our founders, Dr. Tara Sandra Lee, developed at the Charlotte Lozier website something called the Voyage of Life, from the very, very first zygote, the very, very first fusion of sperm and egg, all the way through fetal development. It's on the website there. Very accessible.
Very cool. That's definitely a great resource to know about for sure. So, well, awesome. Well, great. Well, thank you again, Dr. Shirley. We really appreciate the work
Thank
that
you
you're
all.
doing. And yeah, we'll definitely continue to tell people about salt and make sure that it is easy to talk about, just like just like air. So
Yeah.
exactly. But awesome.
Thanks so
Thank
much
you. All
for
right.
spreading the word for us.
Absolutely. Anytime. We'd love to have you back. I'd love if we had more time. I would. I'd love to talk kind of more about the public policy aspects of things at some point too, and how you guys plan to like, kind of use that to influence public policy. So maybe that can be like our next topic. That's
Okay,
up my alley.
that'll be
So
great.
yeah, love that. So awesome.
All
All
right.
right.
Well,
Well,
thank you all.
yes. Thank you for listening, everyone. We'll see you next week. All right. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Ever Living podcast, a podcast by New Hampshire Right-to-Life, New Hampshire's oldest and most active pro-life organization. You can learn more about our work and learn how to get involved at www.nhrtl.org. If you would like to donate to our mission, you can make a donation at www.nhrtl.org/donate. See you next week. May God bless you and be very near to you, and may you be ever living.